Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is a somewhat controversial game that came out recently. It's been developed by Rocksteady Studios, who are known for making the Batman Arkham games, all of which I've played and are all amazing. So most people, myself included, were a bit caught off guard when their latest game was revealed to be an online-only live service game with a battle pass, which quickly made the majority of people disregard the game immediately. The hate was so bad after the initial announcement that they even ended up removing the planned battle pass at launch. But despite all the pretty worrying signs, I decided to buy the game anyway, and tried going into it with an open mind. And this is what I thought. So first thing I want to mention is quite a major issue I had during my playthrough, which was the performance. This game ran like complete dog shit for me. I took some time to just mess around with the settings and see what works best. But even after changing everything to the lowest settings it could go, I would only be getting around 60 FPS, with the game dipping to 40 or 50 during some parts, which actually makes no sense considering this game's graphics, which aren't bad by any means, but don't justify it running so terribly, and my PC's hardware, since it's more on the high end of things. So the fact that it was running this bad on higher end hardware doesn't fill me with much confidence for people playing on lower specs. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking of buying the game on PC. With that out of the way, let's start talking about the actual gameplay. Now, the four characters you choose from, King Shark, Harley Quinn, Captain Boomerang, and Deadshot, all have similar playstyles, with the most noticeable differences being in their traversal. But I will say, considering how much personality the game tries to give these characters with the cutscenes, it's disappointing that the gameplay for each one feels so lifeless. Even the most defining part of each character, being the traversal, is just them using stolen gadgets that have nothing to do with them, and the loadouts feel just as uninspired. Each character can use the exact same guns, abilities, and attachments, with their melee weapons being the only part of their arsenal most unique to each character. Despite the gameplay feeling very similar between each character though, it doesn't stop it from still being quite fun. The gun pool isn't massive, but the guns that are here do feel quite satisfying to use, especially the shotguns and snipers. The mobility and freedom to aim and shoot whenever you want makes for some pretty engaging moments in combat. The counter shot system is a pretty good feature that lets you stop an enemy's attack and break any shield they have while doing so. But I also like how it awards accuracy of extra damage instead of being something you can repeatedly use with little to no thought. The enemy variety is decent, but with the way the combat is formatted, a lot of the time your strategy doesn't really change despite fighting different enemies, which makes each fight feel almost identical even if the enemies aren't. And that repetitiveness isn't helped by the already similar gameplay for each character you're playing as anyway. But overall, the gameplay was good. It's not perfect or even great, but at its core, the gameplay's positives definitely outweighed the negatives for me. Now, this might be a bit of a hot take, but hear me out. I actually quite like the concept for this game. The idea of the Justice League being controlled in some way and the Suicide Squad being the only ones left to stop them is completely ridiculous, but also pretty fitting for a Suicide Squad game. The one major issue I have with it though is the fact that they decided to make an absurd story like this take place in the Batman Arkham universe, which just does not make any sense at all. I get that it's a Rocksteady game and they're renowned for the Arkham games, but that doesn't mean this game has to be set in the same universe. Any use they did have for characters from the Arkham games either added nothing or took away from the original characters in some way. I want to avoid talking about spoilers as much as possible in this review, but I will mention one character specifically that was probably the most egregious example of this. So after Poison Ivy's sacrifice in Arkham Knight to save Gotham from Scarecrow's fear toxin, this game decided to bring Poison Ivy back as a child who sort of recognizes people but doesn't retain any of her actual memories, all so that they can, get this, add frost to their weapons. That's it. She doesn't add anything important to the actual plot in any way. They also brought back the Penguin, who is a part of one mission and then becomes your arms dealer, which also just feels pretty unnecessary. And of course, Arkham Batman's here, which after faking his own death and departing from Gotham for years after the events of Arkham Knight, decides to just come back and join the Justice League after being drawn back to the light by the metahuman superheroes. That's genuinely the reason for him returning, by the way. I'm not just making that up. So yeah, a lot of the use the game has for being in the Arkham universe just ends up feeling extremely forced and never seems to be utilized well within the story. Overall though, it was pretty hit or miss. close. But when it missed the entire fucking target. There were some good cutscenes here and there. A lot of the jokes missed for me, but some moments were pretty funny. And as expected, there's a lot of plot armor and just stupid stuff that happens throughout. But I'm not really too mad at that, since what else do you expect from a game called Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League? But on the other hand, because of that, the story doesn't offer much cohesion. A lot of it is just jokes, some stupid stuff happening here and there, then more jokes. And because of that, it doesn't hold any real tension or feel like it has any important stakes the player should care about, which can get quite tiresome after a while. The boss battles in this game are absolutely horrendous. Honestly, might be some of the worst boss battles I've ever played in a video game. And that's not even an exaggeration. I don't know how it's possible to have the entire Justice League to work with for your villains that all have unique superpowers and abilities and somehow still make every single boss fight feel the exact same. It's genuinely impressive. Each fight has the same process of wait around and dodge for a bit, counter shot when they're about to do a certain attack, then start shooting them. That's pretty much it. Keep in mind, one member of the Justice League, Green Lantern, can literally imagine whatever he wants to use as weapons, and his fight was still as unimaginative as the rest. That should say it all. The only fight I kind of liked was with Batman near the start of the game, and even then that wasn't really a boss fight, and when I did get to his actual fight, it was still bad. The only positive I can give certain fights is visually some character designs or specific moves were cool. That's the only positive I'm giving. The majority of the cutscenes before and after the fights were pretty dreadful too. I won't go into too much detail since I don't want to just spoil every death scene in the game, but whether you've already seen them or watched them at a later date, you'll understand why I say that. Another issue I had with this game is the content. The game's main campaign is around 10 hours long, while all the side content is around 14 hours, which is a fairly decent length, but the problem is the side content for this game is actual slop. Any side missions you do come down to the same boring mission formats copy and pasted throughout. You have escort missions, civilian rescue missions, data collection missions, etc, etc. And they're all terrible, with most of them involving just collecting something, returning it to the same place over and over, or clearing enemies to slowly move a vehicle to its destination. Luckily, while progressing through the main story, you're only forced to do a couple of these side missions, which is good because the ones you are forced to do genuinely just feel like chores. But yeah, I think most players will want to avoid the side content as much as possible, which isn't a great sign considering this game is meant to be as replayable as possible and have longevity as a live service game. But don't worry, another type of side mission you can play as the cherry on top are Riddler missions and trophies, which I just refuse to do because of the PTSD I still have from the Arkham games. I hated them so much that I refused to 200% Arkham Knight solely because of Riddler trophies. As if I'm going to collect any in this game, even if it is only a dozen or so. What better way to end this review than to talk about the ending of the game, where you fight Brainiac, which honest to god is one of the worst endings to a video game I've ever played. It is unsatisfying, a chore to complete, and like the rest of the boss fights in this game, is extremely uninspired. It has the whole package. Now, I am not joking when I say the final showdown with Brainiac feels like a parody of some sort. It honestly feels like a fight someone would add ironically to make fun of the game and how bad the boss fights are. It actually blows my mind that they were content with this being the final boss fight for the game. And what makes it even worse is this final fight and conclusion to the game is basically used as a way to promote live service elements that the game wants players to come back to. As after the fight, you find out there's actually another 12 Brainiacs to fight from other universes. I don't think I could be paid to fight all 12. Never mind want to. By the way, before you can even fight the first Brainiac, you've got to do 3 side missions that offer 1000 tokens each, which once again are the exact same side missions the game's already offered since the beginning, because this game is apparently incapable of innovation in any way, and once you earn 3000 tokens, you can spend them for an attempt to fight Brainiac. Now notice how I say attempt, because God forbid, if you lose this fight, you're going to have to repeat those revolutionary side missions the game's been recycling all over again, just for a second attempt of the same boss. And because of that, I don't think I've ever been so scared to lose a boss fight in my life, because if I did, the game would siphon another hour of complete misery off of my life. In conclusion, the game as a whole is pretty bad, with the core gameplay being been the only saving grace for the game. Even then, isn't anything outstanding, and definitely doesn't help cover up the downsides to the game. Overall, I rate Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League 4 beat up Justice League members out of 10. During the first half of the game, I honestly probably would have gave it a 5, or maybe even a generous 6. But that second half, and that ending especially, was so offensively bad that the score had to go down. But yeah, this is definitely a game that I'd recommend you just watch a playthrough of rather than buy. And if you're a fan of the Arkham games, I'd still steer clear of this game. I guess since it's a live service that has planned content updates for the next couple years, technically it could make a bit of a comeback with some good updates, but I don't really have high hopes. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on the game. Tell me what you guys think of it in the comments. Like the video for more reviews on the channel like this, and hopefully I'll see you in another one.